Alright, we're going to be going over some Rust exploits. These are some pretty basic exploits, but some of you might find this stuff useful. I'm not up to date with the exploiting scene in Rust and what is currently known, what is not currently known, so if this is information that is common knowledge, well, I'm not aware of that. I don't really stay up to date with that stuff. This is just me tinkering around with the game and seeing what I was able to do in a short amount of time. Alright, so first things first, we're going to go ahead and run a console command which is going to remove the entire terrain. This is going to allow you to be able to see through the ground, and unfortunately you cannot see through the objects in player-made bases and walls and things like that. You can't see through that, but you can see through all the terrain, which is going to be very useful. To do that, we're going to be using a console command benchmark. And benchmark basically, when you run it normally, what it does is it's going to load through a series of files. One of them, the first one being a demo file, which is kind of like a developer-made demo that basically kind of runs through a map in no-clip mode. And you're basically observing someone run through a map. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, a lot of shooting and firing. It's basically what you may see in a normal map when you play online, and it's just seeing if you can even play the game. Then after the demo file, it's going to load through a series of benchmark files, which are basically scenarios in the game to see whether or not your computer can handle the client loading a whole bunch of models, such as fireworks or monuments. There's various different things that it's going to run through testing to see whether or not your computer is capable of handling that stuff. There's another way to use this function. Instead of just doing benchmark, which automatically runs through a series of predefined files, you can actually do benchmark and then you do space and then you type in the benchmark file name. In this case, it would load specifically just the benchmark file that you want to mess with. Now, I don't believe benchmark is currently updated for the current version of the game, and I don't think the game developers necessarily intended people to be able to use this console command. Whether or not it's intended or it's not intended, I'm not sure, but if you try to use benchmark right now, it will disconnect you, create a null exception error, and it will kick you from the current match that you're playing on. So let's go ahead and show you what that's like. So we're going to do benchmark, and then we're going to do monument benchmark, which is the name of the monument file. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and load that, but it's going to cause an exception. It's going to kick us from the match that we're currently playing on. So maybe this is their way of going about just, like they don't really care if people try to run that command because it'll just kick you. But there is a bypass for this, and I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. So what you want to do is start connecting to a server, and as you're connecting to a server, you're going to wait for it to say loading world. And when you see loading world, at this point, you're going to see spawning world. It's going to start loading all the world objects. This is a point at which you can run that command, and you will not get disconnected. So let's go ahead and try that. First, you're going to want to open your console by pressing F1, and then you're going to want to head and type in benchmark space monument benchmark. This is case sensitive, so you want to make sure that you get the name correct. It is a little bit laggy when you try to mess with the console. You're trying to mess with the console while the client is loading an entire map, so it might be a little bit laggy. It might be easier if you go ahead and key bind one of your keys for that command. In that case, you could just press the key as you're loading in, so you don't have to interact with the console depending on how fast your computer is in loading the game client. So it's going through a series of monuments while you're being loaded into this world map. And as you can see, the terrain is no longer visible because in this benchmark test, it only loads the objects it wants to load. It disregards the terrain. And because you're also loaded into a world while this is going on, it removes the terrain and it only loads the models it wants to load. But we can obviously see through the ground. You can see a player's base over there, and you'll be able to see NPCs, players, object nodes, and all those good things. Another way to use this, if someone has like a cave base and you're standing on top of the cave, you'll be able to run this command while logging in, and then you can see the entire layout of their cave base, which would be useful if you want to come up with a plan on how to approach that. So a pretty interesting exploit. As you can see in the top left hand corner of my screen, it says 7 out of 32. It's going to go all the way to 32, and then it's going to finish the scripts of running this monument benchmark, which will cause a null exception error. It'll kick you from the game. So this is a time limited exploit. You only have a certain amount of time to work with this, but it gives you an idea on, let's say if you're being raided, you can maybe look through the ground and see who's coming at you, how many people there are. You can look above, you can look down. It's a pretty useful exploit for that. But we're going to go ahead and kind of end this test. And the way to do that is you want to open your console and type in disconnect or client.disconnect. It's going to kick you from the server, and it's going to leave you in this bugged UI state. Now it's monument 10 out of 32 because you disconnected for the server. For whatever reason, it kind of stopped in the tracks of loading the monuments. So if you try to reconnect, your UI is still going to be bugged and the train is going to be visible. So to fix you want to go ahead and do benchmark space and then just type in random letters or numbers so that it tries to load a file with an invalid name. In which case it's going to finish the script of running a benchmark and it's going to fix your UI and go back to normal. So there it is. It wasn't able to load that scene. So let's go ahead and reconnect. But this time we're going to be trying a different benchmark. So this time we're going to be doing benchmark space firework benchmark. Again, firework is capital, first level is capital, and then benchmark also has a capital B. You want to make sure that's correct. So let's go ahead and connect, and then again wait for spawning world before you send that command. Okay, we see spawning world. I like to wait a little bit just to maximize the time I have to play around with this. I personally prefer the firework benchmark. It gives you a decent amount of time, but it's not as laggy. Okay, right now would be a good time to do it. It's going to take some time to load you in. I notice you can't really interact with much during these states. There might be other benchmark files that act differently as far as how your UI works in these states. But yeah, this is basically going to load a whole bunch of fireworks. This is all client side. Other people will not see this. This is all, everything here that you're seeing is client side. But as you can see, I can, actually load a lot more models. It's not as laggy, and you could, yeah, you can see a whole bunch of fireworks. And basically, it's just stress testing your machine, seeing if you can handle this. But as you can see, I can look at all this. It doesn't show all models. Sometimes it gets a little buggy. It is a little more cleaner. Basically shows what you want to look at. Just you can see where NPCs are. You can see, there's a horse over there. You can see the nodes. You can see player's base. So a lot more efficient and easier to work with. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and leave this test. So to do that, again, we're going to do disconnect. And remember, it's still going through its cycle. So to fix our UI, we want to do benchmark and then just a random name so that it has an invalid name, and then it's going to end the session or end the test. So there, are back to normal. Let's go ahead and reconnect to that server. Now I'm going to be showing you an exploit. Okay, yeah, sometimes you get some really weird errors. Yeah, just reconnect, you'll be fine. So sometimes it throws these weird exception errors and it can close your game. It does create a bunch of error logs, and whether that information is reported to the server that you're playing on or to the developers directly, I'm not sure. So if you guys are going to be exploiting this, I'm sure as soon as this video goes public, developers are probably going to see this, and they're probably going to be fixing these console commands, making sure that other people can exploit it. But yeah, so next exploit I'm going to be showing you guys is how you can actually go underneath the ground. Now, when I showed you me being able to see through the ground, if you tried to jump into the ground area, you're actually going to be stuck in place. You're not going to be able to really move around. That's just simply because there's no terrain there. Depending on which benchmark you do, if you do Monument, you'll be stuck in air. Other people looking at you, you'll look like you're just kind of bobbing up and down, but you're not going to be able to fall through the ground. If you do the Firework Benchmark, you would be able to fall through the ground, but again, that is client side. Server side people will just see you standing still on the terrain. So you guys can kind of play with that, see what you can do, how you can mess with that. But I am now going to be showing you a real server-side exploit at which you can actually get underneath the terrain. Now I know the robots have been exploited various times through other exploits, but kind of coming up with my own approach at it, this is what I came up with. So if you flip a rowboat upside down, as so, and if you look at the rowboat and as you jump, you'll see that little icon that says mount. So for a brief moment, you can actually mount it while in midair. Otherwise, if you're just looking at it, you're only going to get the push option. Even if you try to look underneath it, you will not get that mount ability. So we're going to go ahead and jump, and then we're going to use at the same time. So jump and then mount. And now we are looking underneath the ground. You can shoot people from this point, and it will do damage, which is very interesting. So apparently, the way I understand it is if you are standing above the terrain, the server recognizes you're above the terrain. If you try to shoot through it and actually hit someone, it will not register as being a actual hit. Now, if that's actually server-side handled, or if it's the client that still recognizes you're above the terrain zone, which I'm not sure if that's the case, that's something you just have to be able to look at the packet data to see that. So, by actually being underneath the ground, server side, you can shoot through the ground and you can kill people. It will do damage. It's a very, very useful exploit. So if you have a base near the water and you want to throw up one of these things and just flip it upside down, maybe create like a pillbox around it so people can't mess with you or your rowboat, you would then be able to shoot them if you had a little base around you. So there wouldn't be much they could do. It's kind of useful, a little bunker. Just kind of shoot people on the ground. It's kind of cool. There's another exploit. So unfortunately, you sometimes you can build underneath, but you can't jump down. I can't just fall to my death. What I could do, this is what I figured out, is that if you place a ladder while in a rowboat, it will, if you place it underneath the ground, you want to make sure it's underneath, not above. While in a rowboat or on a horse, you can look at a ladder and you have this option to climb it. Normally you don't have that option, but because I'm in a vehicle and looking at the ladder, I can press use and it will put me under the ground. So now I can actually crawl under, using the ladder, I can actually go underneath the map. And in this state, as far as I understand, you might be able to build. Yeah, you can build under here, but when you pull out your gun, you cannot shoot while climbing a ladder. But it is kind of interesting, so you can kind of poke your head up and go back down. If you go down too far, you will die. Right now I have God mode on, so I'm not going to experience that. But there is a limit. You can only be like, say, about this far underneath the ground before, if you go any further, the death line will actually trigger and kill you. Whether or not server side or client side, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't been able to look at the packets. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting exploit. There might be areas, as far as I understand, in the cave areas, there's spots where you can actually build underground. If you're somehow able to get down there, you could have like a full base under the ground where people can't touch you and it still is not affected by the death zone. But that's something that you're probably going to need your own server to kind of figure out where that is. But for the most part, going underneath the ground will kill you. You can't kind of stay at like this point and maybe you can kind of mess with people and stuff. But Pretty interesting exploit. You cannot put a rowboat onto, say, an object like someone's base and then try to do the same thing where you jump and use it. It will not work. So they actually have a check for that. So it appears that perhaps maybe this has been exploited in the past, but as it stands right now, you can shoot people by using this method. So there it is. There's the current exploits. Now I'm going to go over a brief history of what I have found in the past that was fixed. Now whether it was my fault or that someone else abused this or whether this is common knowledge. Again, I'm not too up to date with the exploiting scene in Rust, so I'm not exactly sure if this is common knowledge or not. But what I've been able to figure out is there is other console commands you can use, such as if you type in legs.modeloffset. This is the kind of position of your legs. I think mine is currently set to 0.3, which is, I believe, default. But if we change it to, say, -5, as you can see, you know, you're kind of in a weird state. So there were exploits with this, where if you're, say, sleeping, and you just join the server and you're playing around with your model offset, it would actually move your camera position so that you could see inside other people's bases. But they have recently patched that, and that is something that may have, may not been the result of me testing around with that. There was another exploit where you could log in with 2 clients. When you log in for the first time, and then on the second client you spam login, it's going to keep saying, you know, you're already connected, but eventually it would let you in. And then once you're loaded, you want to make sure that you're loading in without a actual body, so that you would have to select from the menu of where you want to spawn. And at that point, because you don't actually have a body, you could have 2 clients load in without it kicking you. And then when you log in for the first time, you actually load into the world, everyone within your area, all your neighbors, will they'll load your model by default. Their client will load your model, and then when you log in a second time, their reference to you will be updated to the second character that you logged in as. So it would, as if, like, let's say I logged in here for the first time, and then on my second client I logged in here, it would appear that I teleported here and I'm not moving. And so on your first client, you can run around, and the server will be updating their client, but their client's bugged because of how the client handles this in the receive data that I got. So you will be invisible to them because their reference is only to the most recently updated login session, whereas your previous login session is still running around and they're not getting those updates. So you can run around and you can actually shoot them and go inside their base if they open the doors and steal stuff. It was hilarious. I have footage on it, but they definitely fixed that. It causes a lot of errors to the server, and if any developer were able to look at that, they'll definitely see what's going on. But yeah, that was fixed, unfortunately, but that was one of the more complex exploits I found. Hopefully you guys find this stuff pretty interesting as I do. And if I find more stuff, maybe I'll post more. But definitely looking forward to see the comments and what you guys think about this. So until next time, peace.